it's on this one page.
So Colleen just texted me that she would be a few minutes late, so we'll give her a few minutes to, well, since Madhuri and Sarah are here, I think we can go ahead and we'll clock her in when she joins. Hello, everyone. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. Rashida is has had a long commitment tonight of leading a panel for One Earth related to a film, so she'll be joining us at 7 p.m. When her moderation portion is done and the film begins. She's going to join us at 7.
That means I can go over and watch that. No, just kidding. It was like a conflict on my calendar. Dang.
So the first item will be our call to order. And then will the secretary please take the roll?
I'd be happy to. Virginia Bloom.
Here.
Suzanne Fairfax.
Here.
Madarima Chakraborty.
Here.
Ted Foss.
Here.
Matt Fruth.
Here.
Sarah Glavin is here. I believe Colleen Burns may be absent. Colleen, am I missing you?
She will be joining us in a few minutes. All right. Next.
And Matt, I need to go off camera if we're still together at 7:30. I'm single parenting Matt's in Springfield and I have to go to pick up Martin from the GRC. So
Understood.
I'll be listening, but may not be visible for a brief period.
Understood. Okay. So, and now per state statute and our continued emergency declaration, we will be holding a vote to conduct this meeting virtually. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Hearing no discussion, will the secretary take the roll call vote of this, please?
Absolutely. Virginia.
Yes.
Suzanne.
Yes.
Madarima. Yes. Ted.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Matt.
Yes.
And Sarah's a yes.
All right, thank you. I received no public comments in advance of this meeting. Are there any guests here who would like to make a public comment at this time? Okay, hearing none. Our first item of action here will be naming an interim executive director by appointment. Having discussed this with Lori recently, she is open and willing to this appointment, this temporary appointment. I think she was very clear with me that this is not something she aspires to long-term at this moment. And what we will do, and what she and I discussed, would be an additional $2,500 a month on top of her current salary, of her base salary, which would bring her up to about halfway between where her current salary is and what we would likely be on the offering end of our next executive director. And that would continue until such time as we hire a permanent executive director, and whatever that last month is would be prorated for her service, additional services during that month. Is there any questions or discussion about that? Hearing none. Ted?
Well, yes, I'm sorry, you could hear me breathe. So who will be taking Lori's responsibilities that she currently has before, and if she becomes interim director? Will that be just spread around?
Hi, Ted. I'm going to continue to do my job, but I will be delegating to, I have 4 direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
the managers of adult, teen, children's, and patron services who will, and have offered, they're very supportive. They said they will carry some extra weight as needed while I take on extra duties. So this has been really gratifying to me to hear from my managers and leadership team. They're all willing to support me through this interim phase, and I think it'll be fine. I think it'll work well.
Thank you.
One additional question before I move forward, Matt, kind of understanding that dynamic and that the additional responsibilities that Lori's team may be taking on, is there an opportunity for us to consider either performance-based or, you know, merit-based support for those team members for that additional responsibility?
I think we can, I'm
I
fully open
don't
to
love
having that.
the reward for more work is good work dynamic. I'd really like to make sure
Sure,
they feel
and I
supported. If
hear
we,
that.
maybe that's, Lori, at your discretion at some point, that we maybe leave that to you and Billy. I want to make sure we're clear about being respectful of this additional workload and making sure they feel supported through that.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah, Billy and I can talk about how we could do that. I think that would be awesome.
I have no objection to that. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, one of the ideas that came up when I was talking to some folks who do searches is possibility of additional vacation time or some sort of, you know, so I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Sarah, for raising that up. That's a very mindful consideration. Okay. If there's no other questions or concerns, is there a motion to follow through on the appointment of Lori with the additional compensation as she and I discussed?
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the secretary take the roll on the vote, please?
Virginia,
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Matarima,
Yes.
Ted,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Sarah Glavin is a yes. I think we're still waiting for Colleen.
Yes. So,
Thank
excellent.
you, everyone. I really look forward to doing this through this process. And I'm so excited. I was telling our ad hoc committee how much I'm looking forward to the search and helping you all and being involved in that process and getting a new executive director. So thank you. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in the board meetings and all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item, resuming in-person board meetings. This item came about due to an email alert from our attorneys at Ansel Glick, because there was not a degree of certainty as to what the governor's office was going to do with the disaster proclamations, as whether or not they were going to extend it. I think he did reissue some of those executive orders, but I think it is wise to be prepared for the eventuality that will come, because it will likely come between months.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think it's
so
through April 2nd is how
the
far. it
last,
goes.
okay. So we will at least have for the month of March, but I think at this point, we should be ready to move to either in-person or hybrid meetings at notice, given the, you know, if the governor doesn't extend this what I have been talking with some folks about is two items. One is we will be able to, if my understanding it is, if he does not renew the order, we can have a hybrid meeting where some members participate remotely, as long as a quorum is present physically in the building. So we can have, up to 3 members of the board participate from home, given, things. And the other one I'm talking with folks in Springfield about is getting clarification as to whether or not childcare can be a redeemable item for library trustees, given that I'm of the opinion that being able to attend the meetings is a critical function of being a trustee, more so than a conference attending like an ALA conference, which we do reimburse for. We do cover those costs. So I'm trying to get some clarification from the Secretary of State's office and some other folks, given that they have now changed the law to allow for campaign funds to be spent on childcare for candidates. I feel like and of course, campaign funds can be then paid for if you serve in office, but not everybody raises money and has money left over from a campaign running for library board. So I think I'm hoping to have that policy clarified so that we can maybe include childcare as a redeemable cost for trustees to attend meetings in person. If we are at that position, because I think I know the school board association is looking to put that into state law, because they are under the same non-compensated statute that we are in terms of local elected officials. We serve without compensation. And I guess there's differing opinions as to whether or not childcare, so you can come to meetings, is considered compensation or not. But again, like I said before, if we're willing to reimburse you for a conference that you're going to as an attendee, not even as a presenter, I think that's I think childcare so we can actually attend meetings and conduct business is more than valid. So
And thank you for looking into that. I mean, not just for me, but
yeah.
As we're trying to encourage more people to run for local office and be, present in, Oak Park politics or, in local politics in general. I think it's important to understand, as we've definitely all, I think the greater population has learned over the last 2 years, childcare is an essential that not everybody has free of charge to do other things and to participate in the the process and in the community in the way that they would like to. So not just from me, but from everybody who will probably run against me. Thank you very much for looking into this.
You're welcome. So, but yeah, that's to that. So, so we have that on the horizon, so that it doesn't come up as a surprise to anyone. Because I know we were wondering, I think up through Thursday of last week, whether or not it was going to be extended into whether or not it was going to, like tonight, would be eligible for it, depending on that. Matarima.
Yeah, and whenever we return to in person, it's going to be no masks or masks optional, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is we will try to, as we did the one meeting we had in person, do it in try and get the veterans room reserved for it, because it also has the AV technology too, with the cameras in place and the projector for virtual participation, and it has room for us to spread out, so we can all be socially distanced. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Jody. So we're still about 15 minutes from the Rashida being available, but so we can just discuss, I know Colleen had emailed me earlier, and I want to about she had a Susan, I think it would be Susan, about the special board meetings. I believe it would apply to all meetings, meetings that we would have, because they would all fall under the same. They all fall under the same, like Open Meetings Act and those requirements. So I believe that any meeting we had would fall under this. There might be some exceptions for like emergency meetings, but that would be something that would happen if like a pipe burst or something like that, and we needed, or like a public safety event. Those are few and far between for libraries.
Don't tempt fate, Matt.
I know.
Well, I'm just wondering, I'm thinking then maybe we may want to, as we get into this process, plan some special meetings. I think we're going to need more than just regular meetings to do this search.
Absolutely.
And if we want to, and if we decide to have the entire board as the search committee, which we talked about and David recommended, then we should just kind of plan that out so that we have a meeting place for it. Because I just think we're going to need more. I don't think we should be doing this kind of on the regular schedule if we want to kind of keep it moving forward.
I think definitely once we start getting, I think that's probably correct. Especially, we'll definitely have more frequent. We'll have like quite a few meetings once we get a group of finalists that I think we want to bring in to meet in person, and sort of in-person interviews for that. We will definitely want to. We will have more frequent meetings around that time for those sessions, to give each candidate a bit of a length of time that we I think the last time we would do one person a day, and we would did like one or two a week for a couple weeks. I think with 4 people come in the last time. So hopefully Colleen gets on, because she had a question about the process of the ad hoc committee meeting last week, and so I was hoping she would be able to get on.
Speaking of remote meetings, and since we have a minute or two, I was looking up to try to get into tonight's Zoom meeting, and I went on the Oak Park Public Library site to look up the meeting, and when I tried to find the Zoom link to it, I was told it was not valid. Now that was at about 6 p.m. And so I wrote to Jody, and Jody said, well, the meeting will go live at 6:25. How does the public get into our Zoom meeting if they're looking through the public library site?
Well, the Zoom, they're there, and when you set up a Zoom meeting, you set up a time that it goes live.
Right.
It is not perpetually available, because it is to prevent people from joining early before a moderator or the meeting person can be there. So it is designed to go live a few minutes before the posted or the scheduled time.
I understand that, Matt, but when I went on the Oak Park Public Library site at 6 p.m., it basically said,
When you click the Zoom link?
The Zoom link, and it said,
yes, that's what it will say for anyone if you click before the post, like too far ahead of the meeting time.
Okay, because it said, you don't have a valid entry code.
Yes, because the code and everything is not designed to be accessible until the meeting time.
So this is just normal for the Zoom protocol.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Well, Good evening, Rashida. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get unmuted and make myself
No, you're
visible.
quite all right.
How are you?
Just as a heads up, there's 6 of us from the board here. Colleen Burns is running a little bit late. So she will be hopefully be joining us during this. So I'd like to, just for the, for the public record, I think before we begin this, I think it's safe to say that a number of us on the board have met with, have some level of professional or personal relationships with Rashida, developed over the years. I know I've had several conversations with her related to the library over the last several years. She has worked with us before. Some of the board members may have personal relationships, and I think that we are all doing our best to be as fair and impartial in approaching this as we would any potential a consultant for this service. So I hope the public has that faith in us of bringing that. And Rashida, I know we have some questions from folks on the board that especially for those who that we had about moving forward in this. A few questions that I think we would want to have anyone answer, but a few folks weren't sure how they were going to come across due to their relationship with you, so they've asked me to present them to you as from the board, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I don't know if you wanted to speak first about any of your thoughts related to your proposal, or if you wanted me to start with the questions.
I think starting with the questions would be
Oh,
fine.
sure. Okay. The first one was if you've had any, what experiences you've had with executive searches and hiring in general, and what are some of the lessons you've learned from any of those previous experiences?
Yes, so as it pertains to general executive searches, prior to starting RGW, I worked as an assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction for an education management organization, where we were responsible for over 24 schools. And we, as you might imagine, had to fill positions for school leaders multiple times a year throughout the year. As a result, I became adept at developing hiring protocols, particularly ones that focused on DEI and anti-racist practices and culturally responsive ways of being in leadership and management, because most of the schools we were equipping with leaders had students from diverse populations. So that work actually precedes my time as the principal consultant for RGW. I also served as an executive director for Communities First Association, which is a national organization, a national association where we had organizations all over the country who are part of our association. And I often worked with them to establish executive searches and the implementation of new leaders. I'm trained to do this work by an organization now called New Leaders, but was previously called New Leaders for New Schools, where as a part of our training, we had to develop hiring protocols that responded to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm literally trained in the work of creating the process. And I think where the intersection comes for RGW is that I've assisted in this work with other organizations as well, but also with Oak Park Public Library as we developed the anti-racist strategic plan. One of the key components to that work was establishing someone who would lead that work. And that person you now know as Stephen Jackson. And I was a part of that process directly with this library as well. I have also worked to support new hire implementations for other libraries within a 20-mile radius of where Oak Park is. And so I've worked with other libraries specifically in filling positions of leadership and nuancing questions like what role the MLIS needs to play in finding the right leader for several positions across organizations. So that work is quite familiar to me. And then finally, I served on the succession strategy committee by way of RGW last year for Breakthrough Urban Ministries when our Loa Sutter transitioned into retirement towards the appointment of Yolanda Fields, who's currently the executive director in Garfield Park. So this work is not a new work for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
We understand that we, are going to, may need to search in non-traditional places for our next director, and with in order to avoid a rut of the predominantly white field of senior library leadership that we have heard about time and again. Can you paint us a bit of a picture of how you could see us looking at some of your ideas around approaches to kind of avoid that rut, and beyond the, I think, the traditional ILA, ALA, library job boards and networks, where do you think you would search for potential candidates?
So there are a few approaches I could take. I'll start with the most organic one, and that is that the reality is that most of you do know me, and because you do, you know that I have a wide network nationally and globally of people who look and sound like me. I play in the fields of people who represent historically, intentionally, traditionally marginalized people groups. And so it is not a hard search for me as I am in relationship and professional and personal with executive leaders across the country because of the very nature of the work that RGW does. That said, I think some non-traditional approaches that feel suitable and important to me is to connect with key leaders in foundations who meet with executive leaders all the time and are particularly executive leaders who represent historically, intentionally, traditionally marginalized people groups, and to have conversations to let them know about this search. I think another key approach is twofold. One would be to connect with the human network that I have with institutions like historically Black colleges and universities, and in a couple of ways. One is to connect with them to find graduates who might be interested in this kind of work, which I think would in some ways respond to diversifying the pool by age. But I would also connect with organizations like HBCUs and their library science departments on campus, because they would also have a good sense of who might also be interested in responding to the call. In the Chicagoland area, I think it feels important to stay connected to the library system. And I work with over a dozen libraries in the local context here. But I have particular relationships with historically representatives of historically, intentionally, traditionally marginalized people groups within those libraries to have conversations and discourse with them about who might be interested in becoming a part of this candidate pool in that regard as well. But that sort of leads me, as you talk, Matthew, about a non-traditional approach. I've been having a lot of conversations with executive directors in the dozen libraries that I currently work with, and really started to examine and investigate the purpose and function of the MLIS as it pertains to the search for an executive director. And when you work in the field of education, you can't become a principal without a Type 75 certification. So there's no way around having a Type 75. If you want to be a principal, you have to have that certification. And what my research has shown to me is that there is not the same sort of Illinois state standard around the MLIS. So this is a preferred documentation of support or credibility, but doesn't necessarily, it's not mandated by state or federal mandate as it pertains to funding for libraries or anything like that. And so I really see this as an opportunity for us to widen the scope in terms of who can join this pool. And if I'm honest, based on the conversations I've had with other libraries, they're sort of expecting Oak Park Public Library to be the one to lead the charge in this regard. I've literally received calls from other libraries asking, is this going to be the moment? And I don't think it has to be. I think it depends on whether or not we find the right candidate, but I do think that there is a moment in time here that we can get curious about, and I'm happy to help in that regard.
Yeah, I'm in communication with a number of Oak Park Library employees who have left over the years and taken positions elsewhere in other libraries and other organizations, and I have kind of posted about that, asked a few of them, and someone said that the Evanston Library just posted for, I believe it was an assistant director position that was that would have typically had that MLIS requirement, but did not. Now, again, that's an assistant director, not an executive director. It's a sort of a step removed, but I think that other and the people I've talked to have and it's been several have said that there is talk in the library community that they have had where they have heard that similar discussion. No one has made the move yet, they've pointed out, but it is out there. And you did talk a little bit about places that you would reach out to related to helping identify candidates of color. Working with a board is a little bit different or it's a lot different than working with a direct client, a one-on-one.
Sure.
So, the conversation we have had so far has been that our search would be managed by a committee of the whole of the board, that we would have additional meetings outside of our main meetings to have those things. What are your thoughts about it, your approach to working with us, and of course with Lori and Billy as kind of our point of staff, as Lori is our interim director and Billy as our head of HR, as kind of what kind of structure of a relationship would you see as going forward?
I think the leg up for us is that we've done so much work together as a team in the past year, that we have that work to build upon. I think that what is also helpful is that I've seen most of the policies and protocols that are relevant to this search and help to establish them as anti-racist and DEI infused and DEI centered and focused. So I think we could leverage and build upon that. I think we already have a common understanding of how the work works when we work together. And I guess what's important about that, to say, Matt, is that I don't have an established framework already for how that work would work. Because I would want to come in and have conversations with Billy, with Lori, with other members of this team, as we've done every time we've worked together in the past, and say, based on the time frame we have, based on the actual bandwidth that is present to us in this moment during a civil rights movement and a pandemic, what do you have to offer this work plan that is reasonable? And then based on that expressed felt need, based on what they articulate and prioritize, we will work together to develop a workflow that fits within the confines of what the board's expectations are for delivering executive director. And I've done this work when you say that it's different than working with maybe an ED, one person to secure a role or position, I concur. But when I did the work to help acquisition Yolanda at Breakthrough, it was working directly with their board of directors. And I've done that in other places as well with denominations who were working to secure executive leadership. I've done this with the Christian Reformed Church denomination, the Evangelical Covenant Church denomination. So I'm very familiar with the nuances of working with a team to get this done. And I think that I wrote in my proposal a general framework of the elements I think are important to this task, including the community, being clear in the job description, being DEI forward and anti-racist forward in the job posting. Those kinds of tenets I don't think change, but being malleable to the team that is present and what they have in terms of capacity and bandwidth, I think we can work together to find a way forward in the timeframe specified.
Okay. So I would say that I think that kind of digs into some of the more process things. There were two kind of technical items related to the proposal that you had sent over. One was in the compensation area, you say a 3% service charge would be applied. That was just about speaking about a late fee, and there was just a question about if you could clarify what that service charge would be about.
Typically, that's for clients that opt into an ACH format and then don't deliver on the ACH within 30 days. I've worked with the library in the past, and typically you all mail hard copy checks. So it really doesn't apply to you, and I'm happy to make an amendment to the language if necessary.
Okay. Okay, so that's more specific to the ACH issue.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. And the other one was it was noted that your process would begin in April, and there was a question about what if work would be possible to begin in March and not have to wait till April, since we're already kind of a little delayed, in that if there's something processes that we could get in place to start, I don't know, collecting input or something in the next couple of weeks if we choose to make a decision tonight.
Yes, if we were able to get the ball rolling asaptually, then I would say we would be able to start no later than March 17th. I will be on vacation from the 10th to the 15th, but we would be able to start directly after that.
I don't know if that works for me. I mean, I don't know if vacations are allowed on this. Okay. Well, those were the questions that I had that had been forwarded to me. I'd like to open it up to any other trustees who want to, have anything specific.
I had a question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Rashida, it's so nice to see you.
Good to see you, Sarah.
As you've shared, you've been through a number of searches that are relevant, I think, to this audience and the community of candidates we hope to engage in this search. One thing I think, we all appreciate, this is an incredibly important thing, not only for the board, but clearly the community and that process. But the community can't interview hundreds of candidates, and neither can the team members of the board. Can you share with us a little bit of how, depending on the pool, which I think based on the reputation of the library, I anticipate could be pretty considerable. And because you're running the search maybe a little bit of outside of some of the traditional systems for reviewing mass intake for interview or for resumes and whatever other criteria we decide we want to collect from the pool. Can you share with us kind of how you and the team at RGW, typically go about kind of cultivating and narrowing to bring a more refined list forward, knowing that, you got to sleep at some time, and where a firm approach may be a much more mechanical search, I'm anticipating doing this a bit differently. Could you share that kind of screening mentality with us, and maybe how, not to say we're going to get to a magic, 3 finalists without any work from the team on this call. I hope we put in a lot of work that's productive, but I think understanding that process in your mind would be helpful for me.
Yeah, Sarah, that's a good question. So one of the things that I think is really important is to establish with your input a finalized rubric of what you all feel are non-negotiable. Some of the things I would guess those things would be, and I've made myself a list. We might want to consider the context in which candidates have previously led. Oak Park is a very particular kind of place. And if you're not familiar with it, I don't think that we should sign you up for what would come of that, right? Also, given how the library is funded, we'll want to know candidates' capacity to manage relationships and resources on a political landscape that's informed by governmental entities. That feels very important on the Oak Park landscape. And if that's not something you're accustomed to, again, we want quality leadership, but we also don't want to set people up for failure. And I think that there could be some snares there if people don't understand those dynamics. Obviously, the anti-racism work we've done feels really important. We want to know that people have the capacity to carry that work forward. We'll want to gauge for whether or not they have an MLIS degree, their passion for library science. So even if I don't have a background in MLIS, do I have a passion for literacy? And how am I defining that? These are some of the non-negotiables that I think could help us to quickly weed out people who this would not be a good fit for. I know that the library has spent a lot of time getting clarity around what neutrality means at OPPL. And I think I'm fine to give people the definition of neutrality, but then I would want to know, based on that definition, how they respond to Oak Park Public Library's position on neutrality. And then I'm sure there will be other considerations that you all might add to the ones that I just know because I have been working with the library so long. And we would put together a rubric so that some of these will just weed people out, but others will give us a continuum of candidates in the pool so that even once we have a pool, we have a variation of where people fall on these non-negotiable categories. And I think that's a way forward to minimizing the number of candidates we bring forth.
Thank you, that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Rashida, thank you so much. I was coming into this conversation thinking that if we don't have somebody with an MLIS, we won't have a librarian, we'll have a bureaucrat. But I think you just said there are those non-negotiables where you have to look at the background of somebody and maybe that degree isn't all that important. But above all, we want a librarian.
Sure.
Secondly, if you weren't our executive director search firm and you're already working with us, how would you help us in our executive search?
That's a good question, Ted, and I have an answer. I've actually done that before. I served as a process observer for all of the DEI and anti-racist snares that come through the hiring protocol process. But the difference there is that while I look at that process and I will give direct feedback on my observations, you don't get access to my network. So that's the difference.
That's called a carrot and stick.
I think also what's the reason why I feel like this is a good season to have the MLIS conversation is because I know who your librarians are. And while I don't think it would be appropriate to overextend them on behalf of a leader, I think if we had a rock star leader who just needed to be filled in on some aspects of the what the MLIS degree has to offer, but this leader had executive leadership and executive function and public relations and community engagement capacity, that could make sort of a dream team that I'm curious about.
But as you said earlier, has that sense of what a library is about. It's not just a bureaucrat.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have one more, Matt, am I allowed?
Yes, of course.
As you're thinking about the application process itself and considering your experience with the focus you've had on identifying really leaders that I think have been so influential in keeping an organization either on a path that's been established or that you want to move in that direction. Are there tools that you've seen successfully used kind of beyond a CV or resume that can dig into, you know, a light version of a writing sample on some key tenets that that still align with not creating unnecessary barriers? Like I want to, I think, be mindful of not making a process so cumbersome that we have candidates that choose not to follow the path, but at the same time, really get us to some frank answers around, I think, especially Suzanne, in pointing out kind of the flaws in a lot of traditional search processes, you know, that you've seen successfully. And you don't have to give away the keys to the kingdom. I don't want secrets, but, you know, just kind of tools that you may have implemented that you think have been helpful that might be a little different than what we've heard from other firms.
Yeah, I've also worked with the children's school in diversifying their process to make a more diverse and accessible lane for applicants. And a lot of the things we talked about is giving time frames, date ranges, and time ranges for submission, as opposed to hard stops, is a characteristic of whiteness that I think is sometimes a barrier to accessibility. I think allowing people, especially given our current context, to use videos or even record themselves on Zoom and submit the Zoom is refreshing and rewarding for the candidate, but also for the consultant that has to get through all of the content as well. I think it's a much more efficient process. I think it lends itself to nonverbal cultural cues that can be very critical for my consulting practices, analysis of a candidate that you can't get through just print submissions. And so those are some of the pipelines that create more accessibility. I think also the way that our firm would interview people would be different because we don't really want the suited and booted and tied up T crossed and I dotted version of the person, because then we cannot access the person we're trying to access. During the interview process with OPPL for the DEI position, there was a candidate who interviewed from their backyard with a glass of iced tea, and that might have been off-putting for someone. It was very appealing for me because I felt like I was getting more organic and authentic responses than I would if the person was nervous and bound up by the predominant cultural ways of being that we often have to carry into interview protocols. So those are some of the, and to be honest, that people will show up differently if people who look and sound like me are a part of the process. So just my presence will relax them into authenticity in a way that I think is beneficial to the process. So those are some of the tricks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Matt, you're muted.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any specific questions for Rashida? As we...
I've been thinking about the whole notion of not requiring the MLIS, which I have been an advocate for, that we should be open to not requiring that. But I'm also thinking about, and you know, with you, it's not as much of a concern as with some of the other firms that we were looking at, but that we can often underestimate how many amazing leaders exist with master's degrees. And so I'm just curious how you're thinking about framing that and wording it so that it's kind of taking this hurdle and this requirement away, but also honoring people who have done that work, because I think there's plenty out there. And I
And
think
it's a
there's
lot of work. We want to honor that work. Yeah.
Right.
So I've been toying with this for the last 3 months. I've been having this conversation across libraries, particularly because I was 3 months ago, years old, when I realized that this wasn't a state certification. I thought it was either the state or the federal level that was holding this in place. And so ever since I found out that it's not, I've gotten curious about what kinds of other master's degrees could be helpful as an executive director of a library. And I wonder about public policy. I wonder about political science. I wonder about communications. I wonder about an MSW. So there are a few graduate programs that I think get me curious. And to Ted's point, and now also tell me what you love about libraries and how you've come to love it, that still has to be a question. But I think in terms of how we word the posting, Suzanne, I was playing with some language today, and I think I said something like MLIS degrees will be recognized, master's degrees are preferred, or MLIS degrees are recognized, but we welcome graduate level work from social service aspects of study, some social service fields of study, and I know you all will work with me together as we, fine tune the language, but there's a way to broaden the communication to make clear we want to honor graduate level work. And arguably that says something about your commitment to literacy as well. But that we also want you to have a heart for libraries.
In that regard, Rashida, does the HBCU Library Alliance have any policy statement on this issue?
I haven't seen a policy statement from them, but
Right.
this is new news to me that you don't even have to have this MLIS. So I'm still doing my homework on what that means. But what I am confident in is the network I have and putting the feeler out for this and letting them know about this nuance and how we're looking at graduate level work and what that has to afford us as a result.
Because I would love to know if HBCU Library Alliance has, they've obviously thought about this.
For sure.
They're working on, it'll be interesting to see what they have to say.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I guess
interested
that would
as
help
well.
us in our language.
If there are no other questions.
I'm sorry,
No, please go ahead.
sorry. I don't like being the person that's making us stay longer.
Oh, no, because I'm going to ask a question too. So it can be
Okay.
my fault today.
Good. Well, I'm really glad to hear you, Rashida, talk about the other master's level programs, because one of the things that I've been struggling with is whether or not it's just a false opposition to pit diversity and expertise against each other, that I would like, so I would like for us to imagine and hold very confidently the place that it's very possible to have those two things and that they're not in competition. I think it's actually really troubling sort of framework that I'm seeing develop in other places too. So I was just wondering if you could speak to maybe a little bit more about how we might pull in, like a respect for expertise alongside, not in competition with.
Oh, for me, it's inherent. I'm sorry if I haven't articulated it. It's my full expectation every day of my life. I think that I don't think of them as ever separate. But I definitely understand, Madarima, why you would name it, because I see the same context, same dynamics playing out on the national context. As we talk about DEI, it's like we got to water something down to accommodate the excellence of the hidden PG or Black or BIPOC community, and it's just not true. So I think for me, I guess what I would explicitly name is we're going to make more room for who can be in this seat, because this seat actually is requiring more than it has required in the past. When you think about the homeless population that is now coming into the library, when you think about some of the mental health issues that libraries are coming to the forefront to talk about quite candidly, when you think about the resources that our communities need, they look very different than only knowing or prioritizing things that are pertaining to the Dewey Decimal System or things that are pertaining to categories, right? And that's not to minimize the MLIS in any way, but we have to know that it wasn't designed to hold some of what our libraries are currently holding. So we're not widening this context to accommodate the incapacity of hidden PGs and BIPOC community members. We're widening the context because the context has been widened, and the leaders will require the ability and capacity to respond to the widening of library services.
Thank you.
Sure.
Virginia.
Nope, I lied. I answered my own question. I reread the proposal and I found my own answer. So it really is Madrima's fault. So.
All right.
Quickly, someone say something else, real quick.
All right. If there are no other questions, Rashida, we will let you return to your other event if that's where you need to be.
Yes.
Because I know we have there were some other questions related to not specifically your proposal, but about the process in general that we've been approaching that that some of the trustees wanted to discuss tonight. So I will definitely follow up with you tonight and let you know any decision we make, or if we choose to postpone our decision from tonight. I will follow up with you after the meeting to let you know one way or the other.
All right. Thank you all so much.
You're
Thank
very
you
welcome.
so much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you, Rashida.
Good to see you all.
Okay. So why didn't we interview all the candidates before? Why did no one think of that before? If only we had thought of that. Yes, it was mentioned, and it was not by me.
We'd still be interviewing people if we'd done all of that.
That's true. We
So
would have.
maybe we should have done it differently, but
Maybe we should have, but we are where we are. So, back to the process. Colleen had emailed me earlier because I think we, a good job of explaining what happened last week with the ad hoc committee was not done, and that was partially, I think, my fault for not making sure that we communicated how that discussion went and what went into leading into that meeting. So we, agreed to reopen the RFP and solicit additional people. I then sent out our RFP document with email language inviting a group of firms to apply, to look at our RFP and apply, in addition to inviting HR Source and Carrington to tonight's meeting. Two of the firms that we additionally invited to RFP replied back that they were at capacity and would not be applying. One of them also had said that that they weren't confident in that they would, even if they had capacity, because it wasn't the type of work they usually do in terms of hiring, working with libraries. In that same time period, HR Source contacted both Carrington and Carrington and HR Source had committed to coming to tonight. HR Source that followed up saying that they had been awarded another contract to work with another organization, and we're no longer had the capacity to take on our work. Carrington and Carrington initially also confirmed to attend tonight, and then a few days later contacted me to say that they had withdrawn, that they were withdrawing from consideration for that. And so the only proposal we ended up receiving for the committee to review last week was RGW. So Virginia, if you wanna, do you have any comments about your meeting that looked at that proposal?
I mean, I think we've all seen the proposal, so I won't go too far into that, especially since, she just presented as well. But I will tell the board that, Suzanne and Ted and I did talk about, what if this is not the direction we want to go? What if this is not a proposal that the board as a whole would like to go to? What our other options might be, what other avenues, we did explore in understanding going into that meeting that, we only had the one proposal in hand. And, we made the decision, we have one proposal in hand. We do want to hear from this person. More information is better than no information. But we did talk about alternatives, if we as a board decide that RGW is not the direction that we want to go. We did discuss the fact that Lori has stepped in as the interim director. Does give us a little bit more bandwidth. It does give us a little bit more leeway if we decide, this is not a group that we want to go with. If we want to see what the timeline is, would be for CNC or for HR Source or for any other group that we were considering, to see if they would, have time or have the space to take on something of this scope, say in 60 days. Is that something we want to consider? We didn't go into that sort of granularity on it, but we did discuss, we do not necessarily have to accept the proposal from RGW. It is the one that we had in hand. We did go into the meeting knowing that HR Source and CNC had decided not to come to on the 8th, and that the other RFP proposals were not expected. So if you guys have any questions, feel free.
Yeah, and the other firm that I had spoken with, Sarah Avendano from Koya Partners, they would not be available to start until May. And they're the one who gave us the other names to forward on to request. And I don't know if, if some of them saw it as just out of the blue, or, how that all worked, or if they just were not right for it. So
I will say, if my LinkedIn page is any indication, there's just a lot of moving and a lot of turnover right now. A lot of people are looking for new opportunities, other opportunities, and it would not surprise me if some of these firms really honestly just did not have the bandwidth or felt that they were not equipped to do a search of this kind.
And that's exactly what Sarah said about Koya, is that, they just did not have the capacity at the moment because there is so much movement. And she also, mentioned that it might be valuable to think about, kind of what our requirements are beyond just, in terms of a remote work and where people are coming from, not just that they not be Oak Park residents, but do we want to consider, the field has changed and there is just so much movement. And she also said that things are moving very quickly, in terms of people getting other offers and that sort of thing. So it's just something to be aware of right now, that we are, there's a plus side to that too. And that there may be people, that we wouldn't otherwise find, that we might in this environment.
So Matt, at this point, we have 4 firms who had submitted earlier and were still in the running. And then we have RGW. So we've got
Yeah, originally, the original pool was 7.
Right. And we lost HR Source, Keister, and CNC.
Yeah. And the others, we had kind of determined,
I think they're second tier.
or third, depending, some of them, I think, would be fair to say. So I think at this point, we do have an item on the agenda to select, a firm or a consultant. We don't have to do that tonight. If we want more time to think about it, we do have our general meeting, in a couple of weeks, our normal meeting. We can set another special meeting between now and then if we want a few days to think about it. But if there's does anyone have any thoughts?
I would like
Rashida?
to move that we appoint RGW consultants for our executive search.
Okay, Ted has made a motion. Is there a second?
Did anybody have any other thoughts before? Because I don't know that we had an actual conversation about it before we got to that. And
We
the
can have-
first time we moved too quickly. So let's just make sure there's an opportunity for that.
Yeah.
But we can
Well,
have the
after a
discussion.
motion, we can still have a discussion.
Okay.
It's not a,
Suzanne, we just need a second so we can go into discussion.
Okay, gotcha.
I second.
okay, moderate in seconds. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to hire RGW as our consultant. Let's discuss.
I enjoy the timeline. It gets somebody into the position, in the June, July range, which I think is nice. I think Lori will think is nice. Is fewer months of, our staff having to do sort of double duty on a couple of the jobs that they're going to have to do while Lori's working as an interim. So I did appreciate that.
Anyone else? Colleen?
Hi, everybody. I am so sorry to be tardy this evening. My one concern was that in the proposal, I wasn't sure about specific experience with executive searches. And I unfortunately missed the beginning of her presentation, but the half that I did see, I feel very confident that the way that she's approaching the work is thoughtful and would align with what we're looking for. So unless there are other trustees who have concerns about experience in terms of executive searches, I'm okay.
She did speak to some executive hiring work, not at the, and please correct me if I'm wrong, from somebody else there, not at the executive director level for a library, but working with other suburban libraries with some of their work and prior to her work in founding RGW with an education system network of hiring executives in that space.
As I reread the proposals from the other four today, I think most of them say that there's a 1 year, if you don't like what we've chosen, you can use us again. I don't, refresh my memory, did RGW have that in her contract?
No, I don't believe so.
I don't think so, yeah.
Well, I think, I was talking with someone recently, I can't remember who it was, who had utilized Keister, saying what you will about our experiences with him. I think it was Keister, but or another one of the firms, and they had hired someone and that person left within a year. And the question came up whether to re-engage that person, that firm, and the decision was absolutely not. So it's one of those things where if we get somebody who is so quickly going to leave us because it wasn't a good fit or something else happens, assuming it's not a personal issue that comes up in their life, if it's they leave us to go to another job or they just quit and they're not sure where they're going next, is the person who found that person for us the person we want to go back to?
Yeah, I was thinking about, like our freezer broke and we kept calling the same guy because, we were like, well, he should really fix the freezer because, like he said he was going to and he didn't. And then the third time around, we were like, what are we doing? Like, he's clearly already shown us 2 very discrete times that he cannot fix this freezer. Why do we keep going? So I think that your clause is, I don't know, like, I think if it would make sense if it was just about remitting payment or something, or partially, or do you know what I mean? Like if that was one thing that would be different, but just, if they've shown us that they don't really understand the culture of our library and who, I don't know. But I was going to ask if you felt that there was some room to get that, if that was a consideration, Ted's consideration was one that we wanted to move forward with, if there was any room to actually ask for that from RGW, I don't know.
We could, I think we can make that, ask for that to be added to the agreement. I mean,
if we agreed that was something that was important.
If that's something we would want it to be included in that, I think I have no problem going to her and saying that this is something we would like to, some contention, some consideration or clause if the person leaves within a year.
I would be happy with that because I think it just doesn't put a person's feet to the fire, but it is something, okay, they just can't walk away. They can try to get the freezer working a second time.
Yeah, well, she's in the community, and I would say that she is tied in with a lot of the work we do and a lot of other things in the community. And if she is known to be the person leading this hiring process, the executive director leaving within a year is bad for her, looks bad for her. It could reflect poorly on her. So I think she has an incentive to make sure that we, get the right person who's going to stay. But I hear your point, Ted, and and I would say I'm happy to have that conversation, engage that with her and say, is some kind of clause, whether it's a reduced rate or something like that, to work with us should that person leave.
I think it would be good on both sides of the contract.
Okay. I have a small question, well, maybe not a small question, and this definitely doesn't reflect my opinion, but given sort of the closeness and the close relationship that was seemingly had with the last candidate, do we see any issues with the library having an existing close relationship with the library? I know previously I thought, that's a good thing, especially given that we would be asking her to find someone who aligns with some of the policies she watched form, with her work in the library. Does anybody feel like she's too close to, can't see the forest for the trees, too close to the process to find somebody?
Well, Virginia, I think that in my question to her about that, I think she answered it in a very cannily way. She basically said, oh yeah, I can give you everything I have, but not my contacts. So you're buying this. That was a canny business answer.
But I think the question I'm hearing from Virginia is, it will, maybe I'm hearing it wrong, but I was hearing is she going to be too protective of the work she's done to maybe, you know, to bring us somebody who might be too disruptive of the work that she's already participated in progress she's made.
Yeah, a little bit along those lines, especially, you know, we acknowledged, you know, right at the top, a lot of us already have existing relationships with her outside of the library or through things that are tangentially related to the library, like the anti-racism board that, you know, I sat on, and she helped to craft a lot of our DEI work. Do we feel like, and I certainly don't feel that way, but I do want to bring it up to the board. Do we feel like that would be a concern?
Let me jump in and I'll just say this. It's like, would we want to even interview a candidate like as a potential finalist of if our consultant thought, or if we thought that person was going to disrupt or derail the path we're on with that anti-racism and equity work? You know, is that even a candidate we would want to be brought forward?
I mean, short answer, no. Long answer.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like, I hear your question, but it's like, at the same time, it's like, would she be protective of her work? Maybe, but I feel like I at least am happy and grateful that work is being done and we're at the place we're at. And I don't know that I would want someone who would sit, you know, a candidate, I don't know if I'd hire someone who would say, I see all of your work and it's been good work, but I think we're done with it and we're going to focus on some other things. So it's like, at one point I hear you, but the other side I'm like,
That's not what I heard from Virginia.
Yeah, I don't know that that's what I heard from Virginia either.
okay.
Virginia, may I respond? Is that okay? I don't want to step on your toes, but I think, I'm sorry, I was distracted for a second because my son wanted to tell me off camera that he got into a baseball tryout team, so that's good. But I think I may have missed something during that minute. But I do want to say that, I mean, I obviously seconded the motion. I think Rashida is great, but if I understand Virginia closely, or if I understand you, what you're saying, that the working, there's a difference between being the exact same person who does all of the diversity work and having like multiple voices in the room who can all be for the larger, same kind of similar agenda, but be able to still bring different perspectives. Is that, I mean, am I understanding that? Like there might be, like, it doesn't mean that somebody might be opposed to the kind of DEI vision that the library has committed to, and that Rashida's helped us form. But there might be complementary perspectives, you know, that are still not from the exact same source.
Yeah,
of course, we don't know that because we don't have another firm. So we don't like, so in theory that's possible. Practically, obviously, it's not an option for us right now.
Yeah, it's more, you know, she does know the library. She does know our processes. She does know a lot of people at the library. And there's two sides to that coin. I, for one, have been looking at it as a positive. But I think given the direction this process went, I'm starting to question every positive I see and see if there's a negative to it. And I personally didn't see a negative to it, which is why I wanted to bring it up to the board as a whole, in case I'm not clearly seeing the flip side of, you know, her having close ties to the library and, you know, understanding the process and, you know, helping guide the DEI work. And I'm with you, Matt. No, I don't want to consider anyone who would dismantle the work that we've done in that direction. And I'm not sad to think that we would engage a company that would not bring us somebody who would do that. I think this is more just me trying to question myself out of comfort, to make sure that there's not anything sitting right in front of me that maybe I'm not seeing or maybe that I'm missing. I don't see it as a bad thing. I think in the time I've worked with Rashida, she's been very good about being objective and staying at a safe distance from the work and allowing the library members to, do the work and be guided by her rather than her do the work for them. So I don't have any concerns there. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any concerns I was overlooking.
Can I ask thank you, Virginia. That's more what I heard when you said it. And I think it's worth asking. And I think if anybody has any thoughts on that, I see, the questions that I had been thinking to ask potential search firms just completely flipped when we ended up with the situation we had from the situation we'd had before. And most of that I see as 100% positive, because the search firm we had before, there are a number of candidates who would not have made it through that process, I can guarantee you. So, and they will with RGW. That I have absolute confidence in, that like she said, her being in the room will add comfort, all of it, and the way that she listens and the way she asks questions, all of that is absolutely positive. Now, ideally, we would have somebody who has specialized in searches and has all that she brings. It's good to hear that she has done some search and hiring. I was glad to hear those answers. The ideal world would be somebody who, specializes in DEI searches, who brings all that she brings as well. But I definitely feel better about it than any of the candidates, any of the search firms that we had the first time around. They all had red flags to me that would have gotten in the way of our continuing the work that we are doing so well, in my opinion. Can I ask you a question about kind of how the search firm works with the board versus like Billy Treese and Lori? Like, my understanding is this is our task is to hire the ED, and then the ED hires everybody else. So my understanding is that this is very much about the search firm and the board. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. That's one of the 3 pillars of what we do. We look at the budget, we hire the executive director, and
Right, but I think one of the place where I think Lori and Billy would play is, with our any kind of conversations or meetings that candidates and finalists would have with members of the staff. Coordinating if we wanted to try bring someone in. If we wanted to bring somebody in for that, to help coordinate travel dates and the such for bringing candidates, and I think would be that place. But for the most part, I think in terms of, I think, Rashida talked about it, the rubric, the criteria that we would look at for candidates, those pieces would go through us. But in terms of some of the other logistical points of meetings and the various other things would go through, Billy and Lori would coordinate with Rashida about.
Okay.
And Matt, I see your point about having childcare during board meetings.
No, I don't know.
No.
I feel like as his daughter was visiting him, a light went off, like a light bulb just went off right above his head. Like
That's why we need to have virtual meetings
Inspiration.
forever.
I think
We're
it's,
getting news from kids. I got hugs and kisses. You got news about sports leagues. I mean, I'm just saying, they make it more fun.
yeah, right.
We got to see puppies. We won't get to see
The
puppies
difficulty
anymore.
definitely goes up.
We should bring the
So,
kids to
Suzanne-
we should bring the kids to the meeting, to the.
Matt looked kind of angelic there.
Yeah,
It's a
I
little
thought it was
unsettling to me.
inspirational, you know, like write the thing.
So, and Suzanne, I remembered the third thing. We hire the executive director, we do the budget, and we advocate for libraries.
That's kind of an important one that we forgot.
Yeah. So,
Am I not right, Lori?
yeah. So, all right.
I mean, given that the first time we did go too fast, I would be okay if people were not ready and we wanted to come back and decide in a couple days and, do whatever. And we could do it very quickly like we did with our meeting last week. So I'm just saying I would be okay with that. If that's the process we need. So, because I do not want to face anything like that again.
What would we be what would we be considering? Like, what is the, like, I could go either way. I could make up my mind now. I could take some time, but if we're going to take some time, instead of, so it's not just like kicking it down the road and then me realizing 10 minutes before that meeting that I have to make up my mind. Like it would be nice if, we had some parameters about what it is that we wanted to consider, or what kind of information we were weighing, or.
I think what we're looking at right now is, and I don't want to force anyone into a decision that they're not ready to make. And I don't want anyone to feel like they have to vote against their conscience, if we do call the question about this. I want everyone to feel like if they're a no on hiring Rashida, they can say that. We don't, I think I'm more interested in making sure everyone has their chance to speak about their thoughts and their feelings and where they're coming from, so that we can all have an informed and honest discussion and decision about this, than feeling like someone has to go along with it. I think that, the community, and we owe each other that. I think that, and I would also just feel bad knowing that someone went along with it just because they felt like they had to. I really don't want anyone to feel like that's what they have to do here. I personally am ready for this. I was not sure I was going into tonight. I wasn't sure I was going to be ready to make a decision tonight, but given her the answer she gave us about this, about some of that feedback, and some of the written answers that I wasn't expecting her to give me back written, that I forwarded to everyone earlier today, I was expecting her to kind of address that tonight, and kind of just have ready for thought. I wasn't expecting written, so I was pleasantly surprised by that. But come early today, I was not ready to make a decision tonight. I was willing to wait that, but I'm at a place I can decide now. But if anybody feels like they want to wait a couple of days and reconvene, I think the earliest we would be able to do that would be, because of Open Meetings Act, would be Friday night, or technically, if we wanted to wait the shortest amount of time possible, it would have to be, because we need 48 hours notice to post for a meeting for that. And then we can do that. But if there is.
So Matt, may I move my motion to a vote?
You can call the question.
Please.
Okay.
Can I just understand, Ted, why you're feeling impatient? And why
Not
you're
impatient.
ready
No,
to-
simply there was a motion. We can vote it up or down. And then we can go and decide what's next. But my motion was to accept RGW as our consultant, and we can vote up or down.
Right, but then it was stated that we could talk about it. And so while we're having an opportunity for anybody to express their opinions, I think it's important to not, I'm sorry, but the way that I'm uncomfortable with the way that you're
No,
coming.
it's
into
simply,
this.
this is simply rules of order. Just ask.
Right, but we need, the calling the question requires a super majority. I believe it's 2/3 of the body to if I remember my parliamentary procedure correctly. Sarah, are you able to engage, or are you still in transit?
No, I'm here. I mean, and I appreciate I've missed some of the conversation. My apologies to that. The one question that I had, and I think understanding that this, I think RGW brings a lot of things that we've all shared, that we value, that we did feel were missing in the previous examples. I think my question, I think around, pushing to move forward, and, you may have in your discussion shared some of this, and I value, especially Virginia and Ted and Suzanne, who'd had an opportunity to kind of spend a little bit more time maybe considering the proposal she presented, because this isn't her sole function. She isn't, by comparison to some of these other search firms, a traditional avenue. There are some like functional capabilities that are, I think, things that I'm not speaking for anyone else on the board, but most of us, I believe, work full time, have other commitments, and don't have the ability to do nothing but this for the next 3 months. So I really want to, I think, understand some of the functional capabilities, maybe guided and supported by Lori and Billy, in kind of the brass tacks of running a search, that I feel like she's very equipped to lead us in running a search, but I want to make sure RGW is equipped in running a search. Is that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think it's the functional, is she hosting the search on her site? Are we hosting it? Like, does she have the methodology to do the intake? It sounded as though she's run as a consultant, supportive functions, but not kind of owned the search process from the fundamentals. And that's the piece I just want to make sure, if we're looking at this bid apples to apples with other search firms, that we're including all of those functional capabilities with equity and valuing them the same way, or if we are going to need or depend on our own staff at the library team to do some of that functional work, if we need to be prepared for that and ask some additional questions. That's kind of my one moment of pause. I think I love her capabilities. I love her rationale of approaching candidates and thinking about places for candidate pools. I think it's the kind of the administrative side of this that gives me a little bit of a, I don't know that I saw that in the proposal in the depth that I felt like I might need to for someone who's a non-traditional route. That's kind of my one piece I wanted to share.
Sarah, do you have specific questions that you would want to pose to RGW that would answer this? Because I saw Colleen kind of nodding as well, and I think you guys know a little bit more about this than definitely I do. But would that be something
I think we could pretty quickly. I mean, there are some things that, even internal executive search kind of requirements of operation. It's really, I think, some of those operational questions that I would love to just maybe have 24 hours to draft and share with you as a team. Virginia, if you're still kind of running the ad hoc committee, or if we're doing this a little differently, but kind of just the functional characteristics of, and she may come back and say, no, that's not something RGW is prepared to handle, and that's okay. But I don't want to learn that after we've contracted versus coming into this fully aware of what we might now be putting on our own team or Billy or Lori, because we've valued, maybe a different set of characteristics in a search firm, and that's okay. I think it's all good. I just want to do it eyes wide open.
We just need to know before we.
Right.
So,
we need to
Matt,
clarify.
may I call to question and ask for the supermajority if that should happen? Thank you.
Yep. The question's been called by the mover. Sarah, will you take a roll call? This is the vote to stop debate and discussion of the motion and proceeding to a vote on the motion to hire RGW. So this is whether or not this is a vote to stop discussion.
Why are we voting to stop discussion when Sarah's just brought up really valuable points? I don't know.
Because the movers has called the question. It's parliamentary procedure that we operate under.
So you need me to call the roll, Matt?
Yes, please.
Virginia,
Yes to ending discussion.
Madarima,
Yes.
Suzanne,
No.
Colleen,
Yes.
Matt,
No.
Sarah's a no.
Ted?
And Ted is a no.
Ted too.
Okay,
No.
so discussion will continue. So I think those are excellent points. Sarah, would we? So at this point, I think what we're looking at, it sounds like there are some questions about kind of not as much the broad vision of her approach and her alignment with our, our mission and our vision, as much as to how some of the technical aspects will be executed.
Yeah, I think really kind of a functional, functional characteristic inventory, or, there, and I think we can handle it pretty promptly, just, per a questionnaire. I don't think it would require an additional conversation unless the team feels differently. But I think it's getting an assessment of some of those, what might seem to be more standard attributes of a traditional search firm in, having us go in a
Mhm.
non-traditional route, that I just want to make sure we're all clear on, and we're still comfortable, that, just like we may be doing this search a little differently, I think, than some of us may have imagined, that could be okay. It's just doing it in a way that we feel like we're fully aware of what either additional work may live with the board, or additional work may live with the library team, or that we know those gaps. And she could be totally buttoned up and have an intake process already planned that I just don't see in the proposal today. And so I think it could move pretty quickly, but I think then it puts us on a very transparent level field with her to say, like, we know the expectations we're asking of her, and she knows what, she's signed up for, and there's no surprises on either side.
And I may have misunderstood the question, because I was thinking we'd stop discussion and start putting together the list of questions we wanted her to respond to. Is that something that we think we could get to Rashida by maybe end of week, and we could expect a response back from her maybe midweek next week? I mean, at this point,
I think, if anyone wants to contribute, I don't mind putting the list together and even committing to getting it back to the rest of the board, like end of business tomorrow.
Oh, I did not want to press you that way, but
No, I mean, I'm happy.
I think that this is really, really valuable. And I think that to get Rashida's response, I think that these are things she's probably already thought about, but maybe some of them aren't. So this will be very valuable.
I think one of the points we should keep in mind is that, as she commented, she'd be going on vacation on the 10th. So
She has
and I'm-
tomorrow.
so it's like getting, so it looks like, I think the question would be is, if we can, could you, I see your hand, Matarima. I just want to let you know that I do see that before, as I'm trying to complete my thought here. If possible, because it's one of these things where it's like, if I don't want to encroach upon her vacation, I think any of us would would want someone to respect our vacation as well. So if we're not going to try and get something to her by tomorrow so she could respond by tomorrow, that we might as well wait until after the 17th. Do we think, it sounds like we're looking at, let me put my thoughts together. Matarima, you go.
So, well, first of all, I want to make a joke. So can I do that? Like, I was going to just do
Please.
it in the chat. and I was gonna say that Billy was sending out a bat signal, but for Superman with the S. So maybe that was just best reserved for the chat. But I did hear Sarah try to ask. I felt like I thought I heard Sarah try to ask Rashida that question about the intake, like literally in terms of volume. Did I understand your question correctly, Sarah? Like, was that part of why you were asking, was just to get
Yeah.
a sense? Okay.
It is, and I think one of it, and you guys probably, if you've worked on searches before, right now the job market is attractive and there are a lot of people that are considering moves. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at more than 200 plus applicants, which with lots of really strong qualifications. So I think what I want to make sure of is that if her expectation is, we're going to build this rubric together and we're going to, like, there's going to be a tremendous partnership that, we're very clear on what role we're taking on, what the board's, expectations will be, are we going to build that rubric with her, post the job, and then we're going to come back with 5 finalists that RGW has kind of already culled down through a framework that they've identified and done all those pre-screens. We're just kind of, her comment, which I liked, and it also challenged me about kind of, how are we going to run through the process? And it was like, there is no predefined process, right? Well, part of that is refreshing and part of that is a little frightening. Because it's like, okay, well, then we're all going to really like roll up our sleeves and get it done, which I think we're all here for. I just want to make sure we really understand kind of like expectations on both sides.
I think every time that an executive director is looked for, the process is reinvented in a certain way for the time, where the organization is in their life and what their goals are. So I feel I totally get you that it's like it's daunting to reset that, because one of the first things we're going to need to do is establish what is the job description we're going to post and how are we going to do that. And it's, are we going to work, is she going to take a first pass at it and with, members of the staff and then bring it to us to look at, or are we going to look at it first with her? And so those are questions, but I think that's a question that we establish with the person we hire. I think the technical aspects of, what are, so I think like, yes, but it's like at the same time, thank you, Jody. Jody posted the job description in the old, emphasis on old, the
2012.
yes.
So Matt was,
Wait,
we
I'm
put out
sorry.
our RFP twice. Does our RFP just not work? Is that why we're kind of unhappy with?
No,
the 5
Ted,
people we have?
what we have is
Yes.
that for decades,
Mhm.
the library search process has contained so much habitual whiteness and so much habitual kind of patterns of doing things in a particular way. And the people that have risen to the point of running a lot of that we keep getting the same results. And we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't get the same results and doesn't keep perpetuating the problems that the library has worked hard to kind of change.
I understand that about the executive
my view.
search. I understand that about the executive search, but are we putting the RFP to ask people to find our executive director? Are we doing our RFP the wrong way?
Well, I think we're still like,
I think we're just in an environment where the firms that have been doing it and have been creating the same results, if we go with the traditional and get the responses that way, then we have a certain set of problems.
Yeah.
And then if we're breaking the mold, then we have another set of issues to contend with. And I think Sarah's points are valid, and I think they're worth pursuing and getting transparent and clarified before we move forward. And I just think it's the nature
yeah,
of
I'm
trying
sorry.
to change course.
I feel like I didn't finish the point. So when I asked Sarah if that's what she meant to ask, I wanted to say that, first of all, I thought that the motion was, are we going to hire RGW, yes or no? So that's what I was voting on. Like I didn't want to vote no on RGW. I don't know. Is that what we did?
That was simply a
Did we say-
motion to bring discussion forward. That's all.
Well, the motion was to hire RGW. So when you call the question, that I figured that's.
No,
what-
no, calling
The
the
voting
question
on
was,
calling the question is to
was this.
end debate and end the discussion. And
and I
then
did not want to do that.
and so we failed to end discussion.
Yeah, which sounds great, but I wanted to say that I thought, I think that we should do what Sarah's saying, and especially since she's been so kind enough to volunteer her time, where we get questions like just about the process, which doesn't mean that we then don't hire her necessarily. It just means that we have clarity about what this will look like, including, I just assume that every search would be, any firm that we would hire would obviously, we would write the job description together, or we would, that we would do that work together. But I think Sarah's
And-
point
and-
about
yeah.
who receives them, who receives the applications, who's vetting, are they promising to give us 5 candidates at the end for interview? These are things that it seemed that we could expect from the other proposals that we got. And maybe because we are getting something incredibly valuable with RGW, maybe we don't get some of that. And again, with Sarah's point, I think she's made pretty clear that she's not suggesting that we would, if that there are particular answers after which we say, no, we can't possibly do it, but that we would just be very clear before we started anything, what those ideas were, or what division of labor or whatever was expected to be. And I know that she is going on vacation, and she surely has earned it and deserves it.
So
But,
I have two questions. One, all of these issues that we're talking about, we're not just going to give to RGW, we're going to give to all 5 of the candidates. And secondly,
No, at this point, the only firm that is still interested in pursuing, that we have continued, that we have as a board have said, that I have heard from anybody that has continued to be engaged with as a potential hire, is RGW. The others that we were even considering have backed off. There was a group of ones that we said that we weren't even interested in, moving forward with any other process. So I don't see a point in re-engaging with them right now. Our questions are specifically for RGW.
Okay, and so my motion on the table is to engage RGW. And I could call that to question, but my second point is, should we redo our request for proposal? Because we haven't done it the right way twice.
Well, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we didn't do it the right way when this is the
Right.
result. This is the place we are culturally at the moment.
I think, and to follow up on
Doesn't mean I
Suzanne,
didn't write the RFP right.
we got the 2 groups of people that we were going to get. We got the people who do library searches, and the one that the board chose to engage with, that is practiced in library, did not work out, and I think in a rather spectacular way, based off the feedback I got from staff and a number of trustees about that. And we got proposals from firms that don't work with public libraries. And most of them we saw and said that there is something missing, that there is something we don't want to engage with. That doesn't mean we did it wrong. It means that is the playing field in which we are operating. We did additional things with people who specify, who tend to specialize in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, who looked at us and said, working with libraries is out of their comfort zone, or they don't have the capacity. I am not confident that we're going to hit more, I don't know who else we're gonna range unless we start throwing out into other states. Because the people who work in Illinois with libraries put in with us.
So may I modify my motion that we let RGW know that they are in contention for being the person that we want, but we have a number of questions ahead of time. And
I think you can modify it, but I think what we're looking at now is I think there are a couple of technical execution questions that we want to have responded to.
absolutely.
I think some items would be engaged with whoever we hire. I think, I posted in the chat, like, where will the search site be hosted? Where will applicants be sent? And I think given that this is not typically what Rashida works with, those I think are good technical questions that we can ask her, but I'm just, what are the other?
Sarah is going to help us.
Yeah.
But, and I think, Matt, I'm comfortable. And I think maybe it's also about like transparency for the agreement and understanding costs associated to our expectations and Rashida's expectations. We're signing a proposal that's relatively different than some of the other proposals we've seen. So I think maybe the question is, I don't know if in a situation like this, you would sign a letter of engagement or an LOI, letter of intent that, while we want to still negotiate some finer points of a search commitment that, we want to further refine the budget or the estimate. I think those are the things. What I don't want to do is be surprised that, we now need to host a search site and we're, going to be taking on some things either from a cost standpoint or from the staff's time that, we might otherwise have employed the third party to do on our behalf, but maybe based on her capabilities, we can't use her in that capacity. And that's fine. I think, I guess my
Sarah,
questions are less about, hold on a second, please. I think my questions are less about my interest in working with Rashida and her being a good fit for the role, and more about the functional capabilities of the firm versus what we may need to be responsible for and the costs associated to both of those things.
Okay.
So Sarah, what you're asking is the $28,000 that she's asking for, what does that cover?
Well, and just in a non-complicated way, like what I don't want to do, Matt, is sit and talk about how we're going to create the job description, right? Like she shouldn't be doing that work for us as a courtesy while we're in a proposal setting. These should be like functional capability questions that we might take for granted with a traditional search firm that I think would be beneficial for us to clarify as them being part of this proposal or not. And I think that's my question. Or my series of questions, which will not be cumbersome and I think we can get to rather quickly.
Okay. Virginia, you have your hand.
Is it possible for us to, I'm hearing Sarah's confidence in her ability to craft a list of questions by end of day tomorrow. Is it possible for us to send RGW the list of questions ahead of the vacation, letting her know when our regular board meeting will be, asking her to respond to them before the regular board meeting? We can all review her responses in written form, and then we can make a decision at the next regular board meeting.
I don't see why not. So today's the 8th. She comes back the 17th. I believe our board meeting is set for, would that be the 22nd then? Because I believe.
Don't we meet on
Lori's
Tuesday, the
nodding.
23rd?
Oh, yeah. The 22nd is
It's not the 23rd, Tuesday's the 22nd. Are we talking about March?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry, 22nd.
She did say she'd be back on the 15th, just by the way.
yeah, the 15th. So yeah, that could work. I mean, is everyone comfortable with that? Would that be a comfortable position of getting stuff to her? I see a thumbs up from Virginia. I mean, and that even then would ease up on being able to have this back before she leaves on vacation. Not because not to give her a homework assignment right before she leaves for the airport.
Yeah, that's not a really nice thing to do to people, right?
So
And none of us like that.
no. So I think if we can get a thing together by the end of this week, to follow up on her, to follow up with her to a few things that I think would, for her to be able to answer, that would be, operational to how the search would be done and stuff without her having to do search work, and that as pointed out during the proposal time, I think would be fair. And I can communicate with her saying, right now, I think, would it be fair to say the consensus of the board is that she would be our preferred vendor, just not our voted approved vendor?
It is hers to lose.
I don't think we should say that.
No.
No, but I think honestly, Matt, even if we decided you wanted to, and I'd be open to this, I know we don't want to keep things going, but if there is an interest in, confirming that we want to move forward pending further clarity on some components of the proposal, I'd be comfortable with that. What I don't want to do is tell her we're in, sign this agreement, and then be surprised by some things we didn't ask to get more clarity on a month from now, and then be like, oh, whoa, it's really going to be $35,000 because we didn't realize we had to do a broader
digital hosting
outreach strategy for advertising that we didn't include in the proposal because she assumed we were going to own that. I don't know. I just think there are things that I'd rather
I don't feel like we have to have that vote tonight. I don't feel like we have to have that vote tonight if we're not ready for it. If there are questions that people want to have clarified about some of those specifics, I am fine with us. I don't want to push anybody into something that they're not comfortable with. I feel like we did that, in hindsight, we look back at that, and we did that a bit before, but I think right now we can.
So Matt, I withdraw my motion for this evening.
Okay, so do I have a sense though of, thank you, Ted, for withdrawing the motion. Do we have, would it be fair to say when I follow up with her after this meeting to say that there is a consensus of her as a preferred vendor for this, but that we will be sending a list of questions we would like her to follow up with when she gets back from vacation so that we can make our final decision at our regular March meeting?
I think it might be valuable too to just say that they're functional, logistical clarifications on the contract that we're looking at.
Yeah,
Okay.
So she doesn't feel like, well, wait, I came and
Yeah.
questions.
this whole
Why
pitch.
didn't you ask them? Like that it's something that we need, that it's just things that need to be clarified in writing in terms of what the contract includes. Do you know what I'm
Thanks,
saying?
Suzanne. Beautifully said.
I'm wondering if it would be a good idea or a really bad idea to mention that this is information that other proposals have typically included, so that, but again, I'm running up against this thing that Suzanne pointed out.
I think that's fair to say. It's like, because I think we can, I don't have to say that in the communication and say that these are, that, I could say that, we want to get some clarification on a few technical and logistical items that were included, that were specified. Oh, hey, buddy. About in some of the, in some of the proposals that were from, specific, targeted search firms that we just, and not to say that that was problematic that her stuff that it wasn't there in her proposal, but that because we saw it in other proposals,
Yeah, or at least some other proposals, like.
we
I
saw
don't
it in
even
some
know.
other proposals.
You know,
Is it
just
a
because
site
I,
even compare?
She's a professional, and I'll communicate it with her. I'll probably spend, an hour drafting the email.
just an
Um,
hour, that's interesting. You move pretty fast, huh, Matt?
To properly wordsmith it into that into that format. And I can communicate that with her, and I'll copy everyone about that.
I'd be willing to bet Sarah could have given us our list of questions while we've been talking about all this.
I'll probably have it to you before the end of the night. No, but Matt, I also think it's respectful and right to share, that we value that she is approaching this differently, and we're, I think personally, I feel pretty motivated about the way she shared her approach on a number of these fronts. And I think what we don't want to do then is, make assumptions about things. She may say, well, the reason I didn't include some of those things is that's not how I'm going to do it. And I think that's fine. I think it's just, again, I'm probably carrying some things into this process that may be outdated in the way she's going to think about approaching this work. But I think I'd rather know that and say oh, wow, we really did make the right choice versus, make some assumption about what I'm expecting and then have that somehow not line up down the road or feel like we are surprised. And I think we might be pleasantly surprised. So what I guess, as you're saying about wordsmithing, I think reaffirming how we're valuing her approach as a different one, and maybe almost wanting to provide clarity so we can level set. So we do, really join her as partners in this appropriately and remove some of maybe the things we're carrying about how we expect this to go versus the way she thinks this is going to go. So I almost kind of feel like it could be in her favor. I don't want it to be seen as a challenge or a criticism as the way she approached it. I think just that transparency and clarity, which I think will help both of us feeling really supported in the action she knows she's going to take on our behalf. We're trusting her to represent us. And I think we all, I hope, feel pretty good about that. I think it's about making sure then, if we're expecting things of her, we also don't do her the disservice of playing gotcha, that she knows clear and out front what our expectations are around some of those fundamental, logistical things. Or she can say, that's not my bag. That's not what I'm going to do. So you guys need to do that. And we're like, okay, well, that's fine, Billy. Is that something we can do? Or do we need to find a third party to do that? Right. And then we don't surprise anybody.
Well, I think that, and I think, Ted asked this question actually, but I think that there might be some value to posing it as a question, as a budgetary question, saying, we're really excited about your candidacy, what the direction that we think you would lead us in or whatever, or that we would, the kind of candidates that you'd be able to bring to the table. We need, because we're a board and we have to make financial decisions, we need some clarifications about this for budgetary reasons. We need to know literally whose web server is taking the hit for the applications or whatever it is. I think that, yeah.
And how do we get from 200 to 5 and things like that? Just some of the
exactly.
nuts and bolts of it, so that we do not end up putting too much onto the leadership team that's already, kind of making some adjustments and taking things on. And I think that's a really valid point. And just to kind of take a little step back and look at our other applications included, there was a boilerplate that may have had those details and was missing other details that turned out to be really pretty important.
Sure.
This has the other details that we really need, that we really respect and value. And it's missing, we haven't finalized it. It may just be that a perspective of what matters most, or expecting what the next step is. The first folks, this is our boilerplate, this is how we do it. And then we ask questions to get the rest of it. And this approach may just be, these are the issues, these are the really important issues, let's get those up front. And now that we've got that out of the way, what are the little, where are we crossing the Ts and dotting the Is and making sure that we're just all on the same page? It's just a question of making sure that we're on the same page. It's just a difference of what's foregrounded and what's second. So I think it's worth making sure that we are in agreement.
Right, and Sarah asked questions and Rashida will have answers.
Yeah. And I think it's worthwhile doing it in writing instead of, if we're creating a contract, instead of doing
Absolutely.
it just in the question, like the questions we asked tonight were the kinds of things to be a conversation, and the questions it sounds like Sarah has are something that is more about a contract and in writing. So it's just the next step.
All right. All right, I think I've got everybody's feedback on that, and Sarah will work on that and get that to Allison. I will take the initial communication to Rashida to let her know what will be coming her way, and that we will be looking at that at some of those at the regular meeting on the 22nd. Okay.
Do we need to get any input from Billy and or Lori about any of this, or is that just what we need from Sarah?
I plan to talk to both Billy and Lori tomorrow, so I'll get their input.
Perfect.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Hearing nothing else, we will have completed the posted agenda for this evening, so we will stand adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
everyone.
good
Good
night.
night.
A pleasure.
Night.
Night.